Do you ever wonder why you have high motivation in some areas and lower motivation in other areas? One reason could be your underlying reason for doing what you're doing. If reaching your goal is important to you because it's tied to something that you truly value, then this will often motivate you. It'll fuel your performance and provide the push that you need when the road gets difficult and drive you to success. Therefore, it's important to make your goals an extension of your values and the things that are important to you, because the more you can relate your goals to things you deeply care about, the easier it'll be to stay motivated. This internal motivation that leads to personal fulfillment is called intrinsic motivation. External factors such as praise, support, direction from your family or coach or a physician, those are extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic motivation is important when you're trying to change behaviors and instill habits and grow in a particular area of your life. And it's because intrinsic motivation drives you to take action for your own fulfillment or for your own betterment or pleasure. Intrinsic motivation is more often associated with higher levels of adherence to consistency, meaning you're more likely to stick with a habit and grow if you're doing it for a reason that's important to you. And that's why intrinsic motivation and internal desires are key. And that's also why it's so important to identify what those true desires are. When your motivation is connected to those deep personal desires that are important to you, you hardly have to worry about staying motivated. Lasting motivation comes from within. Extrinsic motivators from external factors simply don't provide the same level of motivation over the long term. So it's important to reframe extrinsic motivators as intrinsic motivation. Let me give you an example. If your spouse wants you to be healthier and more fit, then your spouse is the extrinsic motivator. But the intrinsic motivation in this case is your desire to please your spouse. And if the cost associated with pleasing your spouse, whether it's through changing your diet or exercising more, if that cost outweighs your desire to do so, then you're unlikely to change your habits. But as we've talked about in recent weeks, it's not an all or nothing game. You could reduce the cost of pleasing your spouse by starting small, starting with a very small change to your diet or a small step toward exercise. Your desire can and will grow in these areas, and the so-called cost won't seem as high. Another way to make this goal more meaningful is to relate the end state, which in this case is weight loss, to something that's more important to you, something that justifies the cost of changing your diet and exercising more. Maybe it's wanting to be more active with your children. Or maybe it's an internal desire to get back to pre-pregnancy weight. And although the end result is the same, that weight loss goal, the motivators and therefore your likelihood of working toward that result are very different. So, how do you find your underlying motivation? One way is to repeatedly ask yourself why until you discover the reason why your goals actually matter to you. This exercise is sometimes called the 5 whys technique. And it'll help bring out what you value in life and ensure your goals are tied to what's important to you. You can then frame the personal growth you want to make in those terms. And I'll provide some examples of how to apply this technique later in the week and next week. But until then, think about your goals and what you value and how that can relate to your motivation for taking action in your growth journey.